Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Pastor Cassidy, for guiding us through the service. Thank you, worship team, for leading us in song. If you have your Bible, please keep open to that passage, Hebrews chapter 12. We are only going to be in verses 1 and 2 this morning, the ones that were just read for you. If you're new to Sierra Bible Church, we love working patiently and consistently, and perhaps even at times meticulously and thoroughly through books of the Bible, ensuring that we read every word, that we take in every word, sentence, chapter, and book that God has revealed to us, because we believe that this book is not just filled with old stories about ancient religious things that happened a long time ago. We believe that this book actually contains the very words of God that are not just meaningful to the lives of those whom it was originally addressed to, but by the power of God's Spirit at work within His church, God Himself, through His Spirit, to the glory of Jesus Himself, is encouraging and speaking to us. And that's what I pray that who we are as a church. I pray who we are as a church, and I pray what we do as a church. It's those who are attentively listening to every word, sentence, chapter, and book that God has revealed for our edification and for His glory. Today's passage could not be more relatable. No matter where you're at in your spiritual journey, no matter if you have been on this spiritual walk with Jesus for decades and you're feeling a little weary and burdened with this long path of obedience that you have been on for a number of decades, God has a word for you this morning. If you are a newer Christian to where you're just figuring this thing out and you know in your heart that you have believed in Christ and you're just beginning to start this walk with Jesus and this journey, the text today has encouragement for you to understand what it takes to endure over the long haul. And for those of us who are here who have never placed their faith in Jesus Christ, who have never began their spiritual journey, and for those of us who are here that say, I have no idea what I am doing in a church on a Sunday morning, there is a word for you in describing what this Christian life looks like. This passage is rather famous, and it is famous for quite a good reason. In two quick verses, it applies the totality of the doctrine of Christian perseverance. But these verses aren't just simply an exposition of a doctrine. They are the very words of God given for us to be encouraged. They're given to us so that we might be encouraged to persevere. Personally, I know that these two verses in Scripture that we are studying this morning have met and landed on my soul in powerful ways, particularly in times when things are getting really hard. Particularly in times when I just want to give up and not continue to persevere in the things that God has for me personally. These two verses have been imprinted by God's Spirit onto my very soul to encourage me so that I continue and persevere when times get difficult. And my prayer is for each and every one of us, regardless of where you're at on your spiritual journey, that you would take the time, both today and over the course of this next week, to meditate on these two verses. They're not complicated. They're not filled with big words that you can't understand. It's a very clear and graphic image of what it looks like to persevere as a Christian. I also think one of the reasons why these particular verses have been imprinted upon my heart and upon my soul is because the image that the author uses to highlight and illustrate the doctrine of perseverance is that of athletics. He uses the image of a stadium and the image of a race to help highlight exactly what the Christian life looks like in order to persevere. And as you will see throughout the course of this message, I have plenty of athletic illustrations to share with you to highlight the verses that are here. Now, I didn't run track or cross country in high school, but from a very, very young age, I was enamored with sports. I loved athletic competition and the clarity that it provides. Well, the author to the Hebrews takes an image of an athlete training to compete to win a race or to finish a race and using that image, describes it spiritually what the doctrine of Christian perseverance until the end, what that looks like. And if you want the message in one particular sentence, it's this: surrounded by a stadium of supporters and encouragers, and while looking to Jesus, the Christian, we should run the race of this Christian life with endurance. Surrounded by a stadium of supporters and encouragers, with our eyes firmly fixed upon Jesus, every Christian should run the race that is set before them with endurance. That's what the Christian life looks like, according to the author of Hebrews. He wants to give two particular encouragements to believers that will enable them to run the race. So let's dive into the first one here quickly. The author of the Hebrews has just finished an entire chapter of what faithfulness looked like in the Old Testament saints. He summarized and highlighted the people of God all the way back to Cain and Abel, to Abel, and all the way through to the Old Testament prophets. And he just finished a summarizing statement of saying, this is what faithful endurance looks like. And then he relates it to New Testament Christians. He says that we, you and I, are spiritually united with the saints of the past as we live with faithful endurance as they did now. But it's better for us to live faithfully and continue to walk faithfully. It's better for us because we are on this side of the cross and the resurrection. We already know who Jesus is, and we've seen his death and his resurrection. So it's better for us because they had to die in faith without even seeing who Jesus in the fullness of his incarnated life was, death and his resurrection. So it's better for us. And this is where the passage begins this morning. He starts with the word therefore. And as faithful Bible students, when you see the word therefore, what do you say? Diane Harper over there. You can tell she's an author and writes Bible studies. Find out what it's there for. Well, the therefore that starts verse 12 is the link between the faithful examples of faithful endurance in the Old Testament and the encouragement that the author has for his audience to the Hebrews that he desires to give to Christians today. Therefore, in light of everything that I've just said about these faithful witnesses to God's good promises and the people of God who have lived by faith, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. This is an athletic imagery of an entire stadium or a large race that is being run that is marked out for the runners. And along the sides of the boundaries of the race, there are these cheering on supporters. And in this particular image, it gives us the mental picture that all of the faithful Old Testament saints are cheering along those who are living the Christian life, who are living along the lines of God's promises to his people right now and are continuing to run this race. And the beautiful thing about this particular statement is, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, these are not simply just fans that are cheering you on. These are alumni who have already run the race and knows what it's like to endure. Now, most of you know, probably most of you, because I bring this up quite often. But I coach my 10-year-old soccer team, and they're still 10. So they're still learning the soccer. They're still learning how to play soccer, and they're still learning how to compete and learning a number of different things. But one of the greatest things about coaching 10-year-old boys in soccer is there is a moment during almost every season in which one of our players scores his very first goal. If you've ever witnessed something, or maybe if you're a t-ball coach, you see a kid hit a home run, or you see maybe a kid catch a fly ball, or in football, like they catch a touchdown, and they do it for the very first time. They've never experienced something like that. And one of my favorite moments is as they score their first goal, looking at them, sometimes they're just surprised and stunned of like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that just happened. But most times when they score their very first goal, they're filled with such joy and excitement. And where do their eyes go first? To the sideline, to mom and dad. They go initially and immediately over to mom and dad, and all with the look on their face of, I did it! And mom and dad are usually beaming with pride because they just sacrifice so much, driving them to practice, driving them home, getting in the car, like, oh my goodness, is this all worth it? And in the moment when they score their first goal and the parents are looking at their son, and their son is looking at their parents, and they're filled with this deep amount of joy because they're encouraged. And this is the image that the author of the Hebrews has of Christians as they are running the race that is marked out, that is set out before them, that they are surrounded by people spiritually who are cheering them on. And when they have victories, they can celebrate those victories. When they have losses, they can grieve with those losses. They are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses from the past and in the present. We are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. Since, therefore, we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, and here's the first encouragement that comes in two parts. Let us also lay aside every weight. Now, I think the catch-all term of every weight is a catch-all word that comes to describe everything that has the appearance or the experience of weighing you down in your spiritual journey. The worries of this world. How am I going to pay my next mortgage payment? How am I going to be able to receive the news that the doctor gives to me at my physical exam? How am I going to deal emotionally with the loss of a parent or a loved one? And I think the author of the Hebrews is saying, lay aside every weight, not that these weights are sinful or bad, but he's saying, as you are running this race and as you are burdened down with the weight of the world, continue to bring them to Jesus. Lay them aside. Don't carry that weight solely and only upon yourself. It will drag you down. It will hinder you from running unencumbered. When I was in first or second grade, how many of you remember field day in elementary school? I'm not sure even if elementary schools do field day like they did when I was in first or second grade. I loved field day because I was a pretty good student in getting good grades, but field day, I got to display my athletic prowess for the entire school to see. And I got to show everybody who exactly can kick a soccer ball the best, who can throw a football the greatest. And I got to have medals that said first, second, or third place based upon my athletic performance. And I loved field day. Maybe you had a different experience, but this was mine. And I remember in first or second grade, I was so excited for field day because I wanted to continue. I want to get more medals. I want to get more first, second, and third place. And I remember in one particular event, and I knew at recess we played football and baseball and soccer, and we did a bunch of athletic things during recess. So I kind of had a lay of the land of who were the athletic kids and who weren't necessarily athletic. And in first or second grade, it was coming time for the running event. See who was going to be the fastest sprinter. And as I was scanning across the room of 6-year-olds, I knew Ramsey was faster than me. We'd played football. I couldn't catch him. I knew he was going to get first place. But as I looked around the rest of the room, I was like, okay, I think I'm probably the number 2 seed here. And I think probably I'm going to go home with a silver medal in this running event. And the way that they did it, the gym teacher had a stopwatch. Had a stopwatch, and he would say go, hit the stopwatch, and as you cross the finish line, then he'd stop it, and then he'd give you the time. And so we'd go one by one. We would run the race, and I remembered I went towards the beginning of the race, and I got a time that I was like, okay, that's probably not my fastest, but I think it's good enough for second place. Sure enough, Ramsey went, and he was faster than me. I'm like, okay, that's cool. He's going to get first place. But I was sitting pat in second place. And then another student got up. And then the gym teacher said go. The student sprinted. And I was like, oh my goodness, this student's fast. The gym teacher hit the stopwatch as the student passed through. And you know what happened. That student came up with a time that was faster than me. And the student's name was not Ramsey. The student's name was Tara. So not only was I not the fastest in the class, I lost in a race to a girl. So do you know what I did when I went home? I got home and I told my mom and my dad, I lost. And I went home to my mom and dad and I said, you know what, Mom, Dad, I'm such a misogynist. I thought I was better just for the sake that I'm a boy and she's a girl and I would be faster than her. I repent. Do you forgive me? They're laughing because they know what 6-year-old boys, say. No, I didn't repent of my misogyny, feeling I was superior just for the sake that I was a boy. I went home and I said to my mom and dad, Mom, I got second place in sprinting in field day because you made me wear jeans. And the jeans clinged so tightly to me that they weighed me down and I wasn't able to beat Tara. Now, nearly 36 years later, Tara, if you somehow come across this video, this is my apology to you. You were genuinely faster and a better athlete than I was as a 6-year-old, as difficult even now as a 40-year-old to say that. You were better. But the jeans clinged so closely to me that I thought that was definitely the reason why I had lost the race. Well, the author to the Hebrews says that not only as we're running this race of the Christian life, that we are to lay aside the worries of the world, put them at the feet of Jesus, not let those weigh us down, but also we are to lay aside the sin that so easily entangles. Now, weights will slow you down. Tight jeans will make you not run as fast, but being entangled in sin will stop you in your tracks. So let us lay aside the weight and the worries of this world. Let us run the race unhindered by weight, but let us not get involved with sinful things and sinful lifestyles and sin in our lives that is like trying to run a race with your shoes tied together. Or it's taking a completely different path than the one that is set out before you. It is only going to make your race longer, harder, or make you give up on the race itself. Do not be weighed. Let us lay aside the weight of this world and not allow for that to weigh us down, and let us not be caught up in the sin that our hearts desire to drag us off course and run in a direction or towards a race that will not give us the prize of completion. The worries of this world are not sinful. We all need to pay our bills, and there's worry that comes along with that. Parenting children is difficult, and it's hard. And there's concerns that fill our soul as we are parenting. Thinking about what will happen to our physical bodies as we head towards death is concerning. Those in and of themselves are not sinful. But meditating on such things, carrying them in and of your own strength, will only weigh down your Christian life. Commit them to the Lord. Every concern, every burden, every worry, rather than carry it yourself in this race towards Christ, give it to God through Christ. The worries of this world will weigh you down, but as I've already mentioned, sin will trip you up. Sin will confuse you. Sin will blind you. Sin will turn you in a direction that is away from the living God and cause you to bail from the race altogether or turn to another prize that won't lead to eternal life. We have, brothers and sisters, this great cloud of witnesses, the faithful men and women of all time who are spiritually cheering us on, who understand what it's like to endure through difficult seasons and difficult trials, who know the temptations of sin and are cheering us on and encouraging us. And not only spiritually do we have in the faithful men and women who have gone before us that are written in Scripture, we have the faithful men and women in this room who are running the race at the same time as you are, who can help you say, hey, you're carrying that weight and that burden of this particular issue. Well, let me help you with that. Let's give it to Jesus together. There is the cloud of witnesses presently here in the local church that have eyes to see things of like, hey, if you continue in this direction of sin, there's a blind spot that you're running towards and you're going to hit the wall. So would you gently be corrected to come over on this path that heads in this direction so that we can run this race that is set before us together? So make the translations into your life. What is weighing you down this morning? What burden has been placed before you? And it might even be a good burden, like an education or a family. What burden is before you that is weighing you down that you this morning need to lay aside for the glory of God? To allow for Him to shed your life of things that weigh you down so that you might continually run the race that is marked out before us? What is that sinful pattern in your life that has been revealed to you by God, the Holy Spirit, that you know is tangling up your life and you continue to try to run with it? And God this morning is communicating to your soul, confess that, lay it down at the foot of the cross, be forgiven and run free. Remove unnecessary weights from carrying it yourself and spiritually repent of sin so that we might do the second encouragement that the author to the Hebrews gives us, to run the race with endurance. Let's read verse 2, the end of verse 1. Let us run the race with endurance. Or let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. A couple observations about this that I think is important for us to understand as we unpack the doctrine of Christian perseverance. What is the key ingredient to this race? Run as fast as you can. Does it say that? No. Does it say expend all of your energy so that you are cashed out? It doesn't say that either. Does it say run the race so that you might receive first place? Run faster than everybody else. Does it say that? No. What's the key thing, the key ingredient, the key character trait of the Christian in order to maintain perseverance so that they might finish the race? Run with, what's the word? Endurance. Endurance. Stamina. Grit. Stick-to-itiveness. Willing to not give up. At the time when your strength seems to be failing, praying to God, God, give me strength. God, help me to endure. In the midst of the weights of this world and the temptations of sin, God, give me persevering strength. Help me to keep going. Help me to continue to run this race until I reach the end. And then notice what the race, do you need to figure out where to go on this race? You need to pull out your map and be like, I think I need to take a left around here. This race is not a maze. This race this race that Christians run is not supposed to be confusing to you. Look at what it says as the characterizing this race. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Just stay on the path. But this path is hard and it's a steep incline. Stay on the path and keep going. But there's so many other people on this path that are running so much faster than me, and I just want to quit. Run with endurance. But look at all of these other gifted people. It seems so much easier for them than it is for me. Run your race on the path that is marked out for you with endurance. It's almost like in the gospel according to John, when Jesus is telling his followers, hey, I'm going to leave. I'm going to depart from here. And where I'm going, you're going to follow me. And the disciples are like, Jesus, how can we follow you if we don't know where you're going? Or if we don't know the way in which you're going? And what does Jesus respond to him? Hey, disciples, the way to where I'm going, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one goes to where I'm going unless it's through me. It's almost like the author of the Hebrews has this in the back of his mind as he's giving this image of the race, because look at what it says. You run the race run with endurance the race that is set before us. And then it gives the prize, the goal, the motivation, the endurance. Yeah, you're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, but this is the source of strength that's going to get you to the end. This is the one who is going to lay down the path for you so that you complete and finish your race. Starting at verse 2, looking to Jesus. Other translations have eyes fixed on Jesus. And I believe the author of the Hebrews uses Jesus' personal name to call to mind his humanity. Jesus is not a Lord who has stayed in heaven and has mapped out the path and said, okay, you guys do it. He himself ran the race. He himself endured, and the author of the Hebrews is so enamored by this that he outlines specifically what Jesus did as a human. Looking to Jesus, the founder. Some of your translations might say the author or the beginner. Others of your translations, which I think captures it most clearly of what the author of the Hebrews is trying to say, the pioneer. The one who has blazed the trail, the way himself, the pioneer and perfecter, the one in whom if you follow, he did so perfectly that he will perfect you and allow for you to endure until the end. The founder and perfecter of our faith. Now I want to ask a question. As Jesus finished the race, what was his fuel? What encouraged him? What motivated him? What allowed him to finish the race with endurance in his own human life? Was it raw obedience? I know I have to do this, so I'm going to grit my teeth and just get it done. The author of the Hebrews specifically tells you what the endurance what gave Jesus the endurance to finish the race. Verse 2, almost halfway through it. The founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy. I know so many of you, when we talk about perseverance and endurance and grit and obedience and following through over the long term, you just get weighed down and be like, man, I have been doing this for so long. I don't know if I can continue to keep going because it's just rote obedience. That never for a second came into Jesus' heart. Yeah, he obeyed. Yeah, he did the hard thing when no one else wanted to. And even earlier in Hebrews, it says he learned obedience through what he suffered. But here in Hebrews, it gives you the motivation for what allowed for him to stay motivated and continue. For the joy. Oh, I love this so much. The Christian life cannot be done, and it cannot be completed without joy. It should thrill your soul that at the end of this race, when your life is complete or when Jesus returns, you will be experiencing the fullness of joy. And that joy that you have because of what Christ has done and because you will be with him forever should be able to motivate and fuel you through whatever suffering and whatever loss this life has to encounter. And how do I know that? The Bible says it. That's what happened to Jesus, who for the joy that was set before him. What's the joy that was set before him? I'm going to my Father. I'm going to return to glory, and I'm bringing as many people as possible with me. I'm going to glory. That's the joy that was set before him. For the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross. This is very counterhuman. None of you say, oh, for the joy that is set before me, I want to go be tortured and executed. Nobody in this room is thinking along those lines, unless what happens on the other side of a torturous execution far outweighs by joy what the experience of the pain is. who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. And as the entire world is heaping scorn and shame upon Jesus for being executed in this publicly humiliating way, look at Jesus's embrace of the race that is set out before him, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising its shame. You're despising me for going to the cross. I'm despising the cross because I'm going to glory. I'm despising the shame that is being heaped upon me upon the cross because I am going to glory. And that is where he finishes the race. Verse 12, or the end of verse 2. And is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus, the pioneer of our faith, the perfecter of our faith, is seated at the right hand of God. And as we look to him, he sets the race before us. And yes, this race is filled with suffering and pain and difficulty and loss. But the end of this race is kneeling before the throne of God himself in the fullness of joy, looking back upon all of the pain and suffering in this age and saying to God and before everybody else, it was worth it. It was worth it. Run the race with endurance. Running is hard. Most human beings don't like to run unless they have to. I run when chased, most of us say. And it's a great metaphor. It's a great image for what the Christian life looks like. It is hard. It requires endurance. But filled with the joy of the Spirit, each and every person in this room who is in Christ looking to him can complete the race. So I just want to leave us with 3 simple things for us to categorize and help us to understand and apply this understanding of Christian perseverance and to run this race with endurance. First, run this race with endurance by devoting yourself to the study of this book. This is how we look to Jesus. Jesus is clarified for us in the pages of this scripture, and we look to Jesus by dedicating ourselves to study of the scriptures. Secondly, run the race with endurance by surrounding yourself with a crowd of living witnesses in the church who will encourage you. Living in community who will help and encourage and support you to continue to run the race that is set before you. Devote yourself to the study of this book. Surround yourself with a community of people who will continue to encourage you. And thirdly, and probably the most difficult on this, endure through opposition by even loving your enemies. For the joy that was set before him, Jesus endured the cross, filled with enemies who were trying to stamp out the love of God that was being displayed in his life. And rather than heap judgment upon them for what they are doing to him, he displayed the perfect love for enemies to the point of death, even death on a cross. The 3 ingredients, we like to characterize them in our church as know Christ, grow in Christ, share Christ, but as they apply to this particular passage, study the scriptures, be encouraged by witnesses, love your enemies, and you will endure until the end by the power of God's Spirit at work in you. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you and we praise you for all that you have accomplished in your Son. We thank you that he, the Lord Jesus, as we look to him, that he is the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. God, thank you for your Spirit that encourages us and encourages other people that are here and living among us to help us to continue to persevere. God, as we think about following through all the way until the end. Would you help us to not think of it as a slog of obedience, but to think of it as a joy of bringing you glory and finishing the race that is set before us. God, allow for us and allow for your Spirit to be present in this room here as we lift you high. And I pray you'd encourage us as we seek to grow in you through our worship. God, we love you and we praise you and we give you all of the glory. In Jesus' name.